Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lena, this is Lena's Bookshelf, and today we're going to talk about some of the most disturbing books I've read. So I really enjoy reading psychological thrillers. I enjoy reading things that are a little bit disturbing, a little bit out there, and we're going to talk about some of my top recommendations for disturbing books. Some of these are thrillers, some of these are memoirs. When something is nonfiction and it's disturbing, that makes it even more disturbing because you know it's something that actually happened. Like, it's not fiction, somebody didn't make it up, this actually happened to this person. So we're gonna go through all of these and just talk about them. So the first book I'm gonna talk about is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier, and I actually just finished this one a couple days ago. And so in this book, you're following Geo, and Geo has been incarcerated for the murder of her friend. And along with her, her boyfriend was also sentenced. And then when she gets out of prison, she's trying to move on with her life, start over, and some copycat murders start happening. Some women and children start going missing and are killed in a similar way to Geo's friend. And one of the most disturbing things about this book was that sometimes the evil is around you, but sometimes the evil is inside you. Or what if you created the evil? And that's all I'm gonna say about that one. Next, we have The Appetite for Innocence by Lucinda Berry, and this is probably Lucinda Berry's most physically disturbing book, I would say. A lot of her books are psychological, but this one is pretty graphic. So in this one, you're following some girls that actually escaped from a basement. They were kidnapped and held in a basement of a man who kidnaps and abuses and tortures little girls. One of the girls almost had like Stockholm syndrome, where she was actually protecting her captor because she had been there for so long. And I always find that pretty disturbing. But then also this goes into pretty big detail about the kidnapping of these girls and what they have to go through when they're living in this basement. Next, we have Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. This is my favorite Lucinda Berry books. It's one of my favorite books of all time. But in this one, you're following a mother, and her son has recently got out of a psychiatric residential treatment facility because he admitted to inappropriate sexual contact with some little girls at a swimming pool. And the reason I find this book so disturbing is because you are in the mother's head as she is trying to live with this son who has done these horrible things, and she's trying to protect him, and she has no support from her husband. And it's kind of like, what do you do when your child has these type of deviant tendencies that there really is no cure for? And how do you help him? And then when he tries to tell her how she can help, it's shocking what she ends up having to do. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. I'm trying not to give too much away about any of these books. Next recommendation I have is Tampa by Alyssa Nutting, and this one is about a female pedophile. So she is sexually attracted to like middle school age boys, so she actually becomes a middle school teacher so that she can kind of groom these teenage boys and have relationships with them. And the lengths that she goes through to have these relationships with these teenage boys is pretty shocking and pretty disturbing. And I actually had to skip over a couple pages because it talks in explicit detail her having relations with this 14-year-old, and I just had to flip through for a little bit. But it's so interesting to be inside the mind of somebody and have her explaining to you why she's doing the things she's doing and how she's going to do it and how she's going to groom these boys. And that part was just so disturbing. I remember reading it and getting chills as she was talking about how she's going to pick the boys and which one she's going to go after, which one's going to be her next victim. Next, I have The Sound of Gravel by Ruth Werner, and this is a memoir about Ruth, and she was born in a polygamous cult. And so her father had multiple wives and multiple families, and they live in poverty. They didn't really have running water and things like that. And you're just following Ruth's childhood. She just talks about her childhood, and she has a lot of siblings. A lot of them have some pretty chronic illnesses and impairments and disabilities and things like that. And her father actually sexually assaults her throughout most of her childhood, and she describes that in detail. And I think one of the most disturbing things about this is that she told adults so many times, and she told her mother, and still nothing happened. And I just can't imagine telling all of these adults that you're supposed to trust and they're supposed to keep you safe, things that are happening to you, and them just not doing anything about it. I'm sure she felt so alone. She talks in detail about her father abusing his wife and beating the children and things like that. And it shocked me and I cried. And this one is probably one of the most heartbreaking memoirs that I have ever read. Next disturbing book recommendation I have is The Good Lie by A.R. Torre, and this is following a psychiatrist, and she treats people with deviant behaviors. And she is called on by a lawyer to help with an investigation. Basically, there is a serial killer on the loose that is kidnapping and torturing and murdering teenage boys. And the lawyer that she's working with, actually, his son was one of the victims. And so they're working together to try and find the bloody heart killer. And the reason this was so disturbing is because of listings of reports in the book about the crime scenes and the teenage boys' bodies that were found, and just all of the horrific things that were done to these boys. And the images that I got in my head were just horrific. I have one more nonfiction to talk about, and that's If You Tell by Greg Olson. And this is a true crime book about a woman who tortures people to the point where they just die. And she tortures them for like years. And she is just horrible to her children. And this is probably one of the most shocking ones for me, because this is stuff that you like read in books and you see in movies, but like this actually happened on the West Coast. This woman actually did like all of these things. Like none of it is made up. It's all like factual and based on, what this woman's children said that their mother did to them and to their neighbor and to their friend, and just horrific, awful things that like I had a hard time wrapping my head around. The author had statements and quotes from these two women now as adults. And another crazy thing is that the mom from this book that committed all of these horrible crimes is, I think, up for parole pretty soon. So like that's crazy. So I'm definitely gonna have to follow this case as it happens in real time now. And then the last disturbing book recommendation I have is Secret Slave by Anna Rustin. And so Anna Rustin is a pseudonym. I have no idea who the real author is. I think that's part of the point, is that she wanted to remain anonymous, because she basically changes the names and the locations, but she's retelling allegedly a story that happened to her. So she basically was kidnapped by a taxi driver. Basically, she gets into a taxi and then he doesn't drop her off where she's supposed to go. He takes her to his house and he ends up kidnapping her and forcing her to marry him. And she's like kept in an attic and not given much food. And she's horribly assaulted for years. And she has babies with this man. And it talks in detail about the things that he does to her. And it's horrible. And he had her so fearful that people would come to the house and she would be like sitting on the couch and they would be like, "Are you okay? Are you good? Do you need help?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm great. Like I don't need any help." And then she would get sent back up to the attic. And one of the most heartbreaking things about this story is that her family didn't really even bother looking for her. There wasn't even really any sort of missing persons reports made or anything. So nobody even knew to look for her. Okay, so those are all of the disturbing book recommendations that I have. Definitely look up trigger warnings for all of these. I think I mentioned some of the things that would potentially be triggering, but definitely, look it up for yourself and make sure that this is something that you would want to read. So let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these or if you have other disturbing books that you would recommend that I try out. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.